I am Dr. Osagie, an associate professor of English at Penn State University. I was Dr. Mohammed's professor many, many moons ago. It's a delight to be here. I've actually been really, really impressed with your campus and you know, coming from a small college town, even though we have 45,000 students on campus, it's just amazing to see a real town, you know. So if I kind of look green, it's because of where I'm coming from. I really appreciate the fact also that your history professor invited all of you to come to this program today. And I'm here to talk about mainly the relationship between community and scholarship. That's the assignment. That's what I'm supposed to be talking about. So what I've done is I've actually given you, I put the mission statement, the stapled sheet that is in front of you. It's more or less like the mission statement for Grand Rapids Community College. I'm sure it's something you think you see every day, but you don't really think about it. Let's just sort of like look at it really closely. And the reason I did that is because my first major point is to talk about your place in community, okay? What is your place in community? What is your place in your society? How do you make that place relevant? So that's what I wanted to talk about. So let's just quickly look at this. Because of time, I know I'm going to like talk a little faster, just so I can cover everything I want to handle today. It says that in order to provide this region and its residents with learning opportunities, which will enrich individual lives and contribute to the vitality of the community, the Grand Rapids Community College Board of Trustees sets forth as its statement of purpose for Grand Rapids Community College the achievement of the following ends, and then there's a whole list. I picked out some of them. This is not all of them. Community outreach. You know, the college will be involved in the community through outreach partnerships and resources. And also developmental education. Students will be equipped with the skills to learn and develop in order to achieve their lifelong goals. And then the issue of diversity. This college will continue to be a force that advances an understanding of diversity for all people. And the mission statement, it is the mission of this college to provide the community with learning opportunities that enable people to achieve their goals. And the vision, Grand Rapids Community College is a vibrant institution of higher education dedicated to enriching people's lives and contributing to the vitality of the community. And of course, the goals, the objectives that they have set for themselves is to be responsive, accountable, innovative, to diversify, to seek for excellence, to be respectful, and to make sure we all have some service as part of our package. One interesting thing that's happening, I have an intern at Penn State, a student who's a senior, who's interning with me this semester, and he's taking a course called English 421, in which the course is really dealing with the issue of community. They have to go out into the community and, you know, pair up with another student and get to know the downtown businesses, get to know things about the businesses, you know, what the competition is, you know, just to really get to understand where am I and what's my relationship to all of these things that I seem to engage with at a certain level, but not consciously. So one of the things he said, which I thought was interesting, I actually asked him to write up just a little synopsis of his impressions of the class, which has gone on for about 4 weeks. This is what he said. He said, because of the multi-tiered requirements of community interaction and the symbolic relation the class has with the community, I've learned more about my home in the past 4 weeks than I have in the past 4 years. He's a student who has an extended semester. So he said, I'm forced to actively learn about issues that affect the people and places around me, be they political, occupational, or social. I thought that really powerful, because sometimes you sort of like absorb things, sort of like unconsciously, but you're not thinking about people around you. You know, they have lives, something's going on with them. What's my relationship with these people? How can I be a part of what's going on? How can I be more active in my community? So I thought that this course in which the professor is helping them to build what we can call social capital is really very important. And I think that we ourselves as students, we shouldn't just sort of like be in this bubble. You know, it's kind of like now, I mean, looking back after being a student many, many years ago, I look back and I say to myself, you know, it really was a bubble, you know? Even when we think we're acting politically, you know, by joining student union activities, it's still just that little bubble, you know? But we really need to engage community and try to see how we can actively be a force in that community. I was at a conference just 2 weeks ago called Imagining America. And in that conference, one of the things they did talk about was the issue of public scholarship, how to make our scholarship relevant to the public. What was interesting was that I found that a book called Soul Talk, okay, Urban Youth Poetry, was one of the things that was actually featured as an exhibit. And I bought the book, and I've just photocopied a few pages, just 4 poems out of that collection for you. And the reason I did that is because you'll be surprised to know that it was a set of students who actually went out and went to the middle schools and the high schools and started, you know, looking for ways to just sort of, like, you know, the way you can just, you know, at this age, call mom, dad, get all the money you need, and, you know, it's always about me, 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 nice clothes, nice shoes, nice everything. And we're not thinking of already learning to build a legacy. Who's coming behind me, and what can I offer them? And what these were students at Syracuse University. What they did was to actually engage students in the middle schools and in the high schools, and they were able to get some students to sit down, and, you know, they were doing some writing projects with them, and they ended up actually publishing a book called Soul Talk, Urban Youth Poetry. What I want us to do now is to just sort of like read some of these poems quickly, because we just have like 3 different major things we're going to do today. So this is still part of part 1, how to be relevant in your community, you know, how to make history in your community. You know, many times what we do is watch history happen. We don't really realize that we can actually make history happen. So these poems, I hope, would help us. Now let's start with the poem Scared, okay? Let's start with that one. I'm assuming that everyone has a copy. Okay. Who would like to read the poem out loud? I know you all have it in front of you, but who would volunteer to read the poem out loud? Come on, talk to me. Thank you. What's your name? Robbie. Oh, thank you, Robbie. Go ahead.
Every day I walk in fear, watching people standing near, having to watch them.
Oh, some people are still searching. Hold on. It's the one that says scared. Yeah, it should look like this. Okay, good. Thank you. Go ahead, Robbie. Start over.
Every day I walk in fear, watching people standing near. Having to watch them is a scary thought, listening to them talk and talk. Police cars are always near, letting us know not to be in fear. When someone is wearing red, either it's a fight going to happen or someone is dead. Not being able to play outside means someone is not alive. Living in my neighborhood is like watching a war. That is when we shut the doors. Every night I go to bed, listening to people in dread. Hearing gunshots every night makes people jump in fright. Having to wake up to screams makes me scared to even dream. Every night they wait for us to go inside. That is when they start to cry.
Thank you very much. One of the things you see at the very bottom is that Jennifer is a 10th grade student at Flower High School. What's very interesting, of course, about this poem and the fact that they were engaging these kids is that they were beginning to know these people. They were beginning to know the young people in the community and to really know some of their fears, some of the, you know, the real things going on with their lives. And these kids were really being empowered because they were now suddenly able to express themselves somewhere, okay? By writing, they were able to talk about the things that were going on in their lives. Okay, let's read the second poem, Where I'm From, which is by Jerome Griffin. Who would like to be that for us? Someone from another table? Thank you so much. What's your name?
Tiffany.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Where I'm from, mom's seeing stars, pops behind bars. First thing about two dancing on the car. Still no food, so everybody stopped to starve. So many with unseen stars. Little kids
Yeah, isn't this a powerful poem? And to me, you know, the reason why I arranged the poems this way is because I wanted us to see just the different stages of empowerment. The first poem we just looked at, they seem to be sort of like itemizing all the problems in the neighborhood. But in this poem, we begin to see, yes, they're still itemizing the problems in the neighborhood, but at the end of the poem, we see some form of emergence. We see some form of victory. We see this particular kid, Jerome, really triumphing because suddenly, just by engaging in this poetry workshop, he suddenly realized, look, I don't have to be what my neighborhood thinks I should be. I can be something better. And we can see that he is, in fact, reaching for the stars. So I was really, really touched by this poem. Okay, let's move on to the next one, My Generation, which is another very, very powerful poem that goes beyond just the individual to the entire society. Let me have a volunteer from a different table. Different table. 1, 2, 3, 4 tables. Come on, let's be quick.
Don't be afraid to just pick somebody.
Okay, I'll just go ahead. BBA, the legend continues. He's going to do the reading for us, okay? Thank you. My Generation.
People always talking crap. They just want to get flat. I always say we are the sad ones. They are the ones that give us little or none. We try our best to succeed in life. They're the ones that put us down like a puncture in the heart with a knife. They think of us as being dumb, but they are a bunch of nobodies. Life is already very hard in a new millennium. Putting us down and criticizing us is doing the minimum. By treating us this way, when they get old, they're going to need us one day. My generation is powerful. We must not all get along. They can keep criticizing, but we're growing.
Thank you very much. My generation is powerful. We might not all get along. They can keep criticizing, but we are growing strong. Again, just like the last poem, you can see that even though there are all these problems being sort of like listed in the first few stanzas, by the time you get to the end of that poem, you see this young person, who of course is criticizing the older people because it seems like all they do is criticize the younger generation. So this particular kid is also saying, look, what the world should know is that we, the young people, are growing stronger. And we are the people you're going to lean on tomorrow. So treat us better. You know, I just really, really love this message. Now, the last poem we're going to look at, which was actually my favorite, and that's why I put it last, is the one called Tattoo, which I wrote Tattoo. I had a little sticky Post-it note on it when they went to photocopy. They photocopied with a sticky note, and then we didn't get the title. Or we got it upside down. Okay. Right. This one I thought was very funny. I have a tattoo and it tells a story. My tattoo says Jack with 2 Ks. You're supposed to spell it with a CK, but not me. That's how my father spells it and how my grandfather spells it. My grandfather is an old, mean, selfish drunk. I don't see any of him in me, not one bit. My father also spells it with a CK. But once again, not me. My father is a deadbeat dad, a drunk, a drug addict, abusive, a liar, and much more. So I don't see any of him in me either. That's why I spell my name differently. The only thing I got from my father is my physical strength. Everything else comes from my mother. Maybe I should change my name to Brenda, like my mom. I thought this was just the cutest little poem, you know. I mean, of course, obviously, he's obviously praising his mother here. But the whole point, the reason why I pulled out, I thought this was really funny, is just the way kids that are totally helpless, because we're talking about kids in the ghetto section of the community, kids, quote unquote, with no future, actually finding that they could express themselves and empower themselves and be able to articulate their concerns in a way that we would all pay attention. And how did this happen? It happened because a set of students from the university, decided to go into the community and begin to look into ways in which they can make a contribution. So as students in a history class, in a history class taking history here, one of the things you should think about is, how can I make history? History doesn't just happen. People make it. You could be a spectator or you could be a participant. And you could always choose to be a positive participant. Of course, we have all kinds of history out there, but you could always be a positive participant. So think about that. What is your place in your community, and how can you contribute to positive history making in society? Now, one of the reasons I think Dr. Mohammed invited me to Grand Rapids is because I wrote a book called The Amistad Revolt, which was published in the year 2000, and it says Memory, Slavery, and the Politics of Identity in the United States and Sierra Leone. It's The Amistad Revolt. It came out, I mean, I'd been working on it for years before Steven Spielberg ever heard of the Amistad, and once he did and decided he was going to do a movie on it, obviously with all his money, he got there faster, you know, got that movie up and running. He was done. I was still struggling with my book. But eventually, the good thing is that at least I was able to write a whole chapter about his movie in his movie Amistad in my book. It ended up being the last chapter because it wasn't part of the project till he did the movie. One of the things that the book talks about is how a group of slaves or a group of people were captured in Sierra Leone, where I was born, and brought to Cuba. And they were resold and put on a ship called the Amistad. And on their way to another section of Cuba, they actually revolted on the ship. And they revolted, it wasn't because really they had no idea where they were. So it wasn't just because they wanted to be free. It was because the cook, they asked the cook, where are we being taken to? And the cook told them, oh, we're going to cook you guys and eat you up. You know? And they thought that white people actually eat other people. So they got so scared, they said, you know what? We have to fight back. If we don't, they're going to eat us. And that was how the whole project started in terms of trying to fight for their rights. But anyway, this book project also celebrates, you know, talks about how slavery was supposed to have ended in 1807. This year, 2007, is the 200th year since that proclamation. But the Amistad Revolt itself happened more than 30 years later, because it happened in 1839, you know. So obviously, lots and lots of people were breaking the rules. The treaty to stop the Atlantic slave trade ended in 1807, or was signed in 1807. So it's the slave trade in terms of crossing the Atlantic, not in terms of the continental slave trade itself, actually happened in 1807. But long after that, we could see that many people were not honoring the treaty and were always looking for ways to cheat on that treaty. So that is how the Amistad story came about. Now, one of the things that I did talk about in telling history, I would say, what is the need? It's important to tell history. Now, I wrote this book because I was born in Sierra Leone, okay? I was raised in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is a country in West Africa, right next to Liberia. And I went through the school system from K through 12. I never, ever once heard about the Amistad Revolt. Not once. And it was while I was teaching at Penn State back in the 1990s that I actually read a story written by some other person, Charles Johnson. And as I was reading it, he mentioned something about the Amistad. So I went to do research and discovered that these slaves had actually come from Sierra Leone. And that totally shocked me. I said, what? It can't be. And then I decided to apply for a grant, got the grant, and I went to Sierra Leone to investigate, to find out, how come no one's talking about this story if it happened, you know? Lo and behold, when I got to Sierra Leone in 1994, I discovered that, in fact, Amistad, the word, the picture of the guy that was the hero, lots of stuff were everywhere, which totally puzzled me even more. So now my project became bigger. It became not just, why is it we don't talk about history or deal with important issues in history? Why do we forget? But now my project also became, how do we remember? you know. So I went with one project in mind to find out, well, how come no one's talking about this? To go there and discover suddenly everyone was talking about it. So now I wanted to know, well, how do you write history? How could history have happened and we didn't celebrate it, talk about it, teach it in the schools, but years later, it was out there. And then I discovered that for 150 years, that story that had happened in which these people revolted, I mean, it's a long story, okay? And eventually they won their victory when they revolted and they went to courts, they won. And that happened in the United States. Sorry, I'm giving you the brief version. And they went back to Sierra Leone. I never heard of slaves who actually fought, won, and went back. They went back. They put them on a ship, and they went back to Sierra Leone. Where's the history? I didn't know where the history was. And that was the reason why I decided I was going to write this book. But then the project really changed because I realized, okay, it's out there now, but what happened? 150 years of blank? And the truth of the matter was that, yes, for 150 years, people were not celebrating it because when those people went back, slavery was still back there, and people were still being shipped away, and a whole lot of, it's a big mess, okay? It was just one big mess. But why was it being celebrated now? That became my new question. And I was like, and then I found out that it was actually an American professor, a Caucasian, who went to Sierra Leone, a professor of anthropology, and decided to teach a class on Sierra Leonean heroes. And in the process of teaching that class, he mentioned the leader of the slave revolt. And the students were like, are you making that up? You know, we're right here. This is our country. We never heard of this. Exactly my reaction. And of course he convinced them. He showed them books. He showed them evidence. It happened. This guy is from here. So one of the students actually decided to write a play about it. And the play, he took the play into the community. Same reaction everywhere. That's a beautiful play. But no one believed it was real. But one day as they were doing the play, there was a coup in the country, okay? A military coup. In other words, the military guys decided they were going to take over the country from the civilians. And it so happened that they were doing the play of the Amistad at the same time. And what happened was that when they came out of the theater, people were running up and down the streets, you know, because something major was happening, you know, gunshots and everything. And then they heard that the military had actually taken over the country. Guess what? People were really excited because everyone was sick of the corrupt civilian government. And so they felt really empowered, and they went back and grabbed the prop, the ship on stage and ran out into the street. And everything got all mixed up. Nobody knew who was doing what. They started shouting, Sembe Pie. Sembe Pie was the name of the guy who did the revolt, okay? Sembe Pie, power to the people. And that was what, and people were like, oh, Sembe Pie, who's Sembe Pie? You know? And then suddenly, the story they've been watching and disbelieving, suddenly everyone believed the Amistad. Because they thought that dead hero, actually, that they thought he had just come back to help them. Okay? It's like, who's this guy? Who's Sembe? He did what? Oh, yeah, they've taken over the government? I mean, it was a total mix of past and present, all sort of like dumped into one storyline. The short version of this entire story is that because one American professor went to Sierra Leone and told this historical event to the students, and because a student, okay, like yourself, actually picked up the material and did something with it, it actually got, it's sort of like really, it's enlivened the community, it's empowered the people, because really, people felt so helpless in that political system that was so corrupt, that for the first time, the story of how somebody more than 150 years ago succeeded, you know, in winning victory and going back to Africa, now became a positive thing. They too said, well, you know, we can do something too. Our lives can change because somebody else did something about his own situation, you know. And so it became a very positive historical event. Now, the last, you know, so I just want us to know, you know, that there are many things. In fact, later on today in the faculty salon, I'd actually be showing pictures of some of the major things that came out of that story. One of them, of course, is that we now have Sembe Pierre on the money, okay? It's part of the currency. On the currency, you know, you only put like real major people on such things on the money, like who's George Washington, Lincoln, you know, the big guys. They get on the money, and he's on it, you know. His pictures, you know, the murals, you know, wall paintings and all kinds of things out there. Everyone is talking about it. But what I really learned out of that entire event about why we forget history and what makes us remember history is that I learned one thing, that when you make history come alive, people can suddenly relate to it. People can actually, you can find that actually history is usable in your lives. And because at that particular point, this was exactly what they were looking for. Someone to encourage them to believe in themselves. And they suddenly discovered that history, that history of more than 150 years ago, did that for them. So I just wanted to say it is important for us to tell the history of what happened before. If we fail to do that, you know, history has a way of repeating itself. So instead of it becoming a positive force, it can actually be a negative force. Now, the third thing that I'd like to share with us today is how not to tell history. So I've been telling us, I've been encouraging us, let's tell history, let's celebrate the past like we're commemorating the 200th anniversary, the bicentennial of the abolition of the Atlantic slave trade. But it's also important how we tell the story. Now, I had problems with the way Steven Spielberg, you know, told that story. I mean, by the time anybody here saw the Amistad movie? Okay, some people saw the Amistad movie. Boring, boring. Am I speaking for everybody? Boring, you know? And you go, what? Such a dramatic story can be like this? And that was mainly because he focused on some court scene where some white guys are actually, as always, redeeming the poor black, you know? And he just focused on that and focused on this, you know? It's like, who cares? Tell us, you know, give us the real story. So there were problems with it. And I talk about all that in my book, The Amistad Revolt. I also wanted to say, for me, I've seen a few movies lately. I've noticed a lot of movies are coming out about Africa, which is a good thing. How many people actually saw Amazing Grace? Now, that was a great movie. I must say, that was an excellent movie. One of the very best that I've seen in terms of accuracy, in terms of its conscious attempt to portray the events, in terms of its distribution of power. Because even when you watch a movie, there's something going on. There's always, you know, there's a philosopher that will talk about everything history is all about power, okay? So how is power being distributed in that movie also is important as we look at an issue. So right now, I really want to talk about Blood Diamond a little bit, just a little bit. It is, of all the African movies that I think I've watched lately, apart from Amazing Grace, which is not an African movie, it's really about William Wilberforce and what he did to get the, you know, the law for them to have the cessation of the slave trade. All his many attempts, and really he did, okay? He's actually a celebrated hero in Sierra Leone because of that. But I do want to talk about Blood Diamond, which is a good movie. I mean, you know, thriller, you know, like Air Force One. You know, you just like, you know, it's like action from beginning to end. You know, you just feel like, oh, hold on to your seats. You know, I kind of like that. I like thrillers. So I really love that. But the reason why my third major point today is how not to tell history is that it is very important for us in the process of telling a story to also think about the implications of that story. In other words, what are you reinforcing when you tell the story in a particular way, okay? Overall, I still think that Blood Diamond is a very good movie and that it's doing one good job. It's telling the world, think about all those diamond rings and things you're buying for, you know, the wedding and all that stuff, because somebody might have shed his blood, her blood, for you to have that diamond on your finger, okay? So I think that was a solid, important historical message that needed to come out. It's just that I also feel like we must always be conscious of the distribution of power, as I've said before. And right now, I want us to watch 2 little scenes in Blood Diamond in which we'll begin to see just that context, the context in which power works in the story. What's very interesting, I know most people have watched it, right? How many people watch Blood Diamond? Okay, most people have watched it. That's good. For those who haven't watched it, it's just this very interesting story about a white South African who comes to Sierra Leone, obviously as a mercenary, to try to get diamonds, which he would, of course, try to take to Europe and make a lot of money. But part of the problem is that he himself is trying to get out of Africa, okay? He's not the big guy. He's not the boss, you know? So, of course, he also, even though he's a white South African, he's also being exploited by some other big boss white South African. But in the process of trying to, quote-unquote, make a living, he runs into this guy that has already found the diamond and hidden it. And he wants that diamond. He heard about that diamond. And he wants it so bad that he's going to do anything, even save the guy's son or whatever. It's like, okay, the guy's son had, oh, it's a long story. The short version is that this guy is looking for his son. And he said, okay, if you can help me find my son, I'll find the diamond, and then the story can continue from there. So, but what I want you to see as we watch it is the distribution of power. How, again, even though this is a nice thriller, you know, one of the very best that's not a boring African movie, we begin to see, again, a kind of reinforcement of existing stereotypes. What is funny to me is that this black guy, played by Jimon Honsu, is the one who actually knows where he hid the diamond. But who's leading this match to find the diamond? It's the guy who doesn't know where the diamond is hidden, okay, the white guy. That tells you something about power. Okay, we're going to watch it, that section. Okay, let's see if I did my homework. Mute off, right? I'm trying to do everything he told me to do. What else did he tell me to do? Let's see. Did I do mute off just now? Oh, please. Yeah, I just want to... yes, that's what I heard. Okay, no, I want to go to select scenes. I know exactly where I'm going, but, you know, there was a guy here who made it look so easy. Okay, good. Let's go to select scenes. Scene selection. Yeah. Okay, go to number 22. Keep going. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Go to 22 after the skinning. Okay, let's watch this.
Right. All right. I set the pace, huh? The thermometer is 5 minutes race. If I hold my hand up like this, you stop. If I point to the dirt, you laugh back. If I say go, you move like your life depended on it. Understood?
Yes, boss.
Come on. Is it clear or is it murky?
Clear.
And the color, is it strong? Does it hold the light?
It is as you say.
Of the size of a bird's egg?
Yes.
100 carats. Come on, let's pick up the pace. worry. They're gone. You know, I once had this buddy named Maboko. We used to hunt bushmeat together as kids. Baboons. Baboons, they were the hardest to catch. They're cunning creatures. Fast, strong, got good eyesight. We'd always find them by the smell of their shit. And that's how we learned to track your black terrorists in Angola, huh? By the smell of your shit. It's not the same as the baboons. But you know, after you skin it, the flesh of a baboon isn't that much different than a man's, you know. I tell you, I can track anything. You risk my life like that again. I'll peel your face back off your head. Do you understand? Make us a fire. What do you say?
We're going the right way.
Hold up there, my man. It's this way, huh? Where do you think you are going? Stop! I said stop! It's not down there, all right? You're going to need some hell discipline, huh? Now, you listen here, my boy, you listen well. You are not going down there. Are we clear?
You're not the master.
Right now, that is exactly what I am, and you better remember it, Kaffa!
Don't you move!
Don't you move, huh?
Your son is there!
Your son is gone, huh?
It's a lie! Gone! It's a lie! He's there with those crazy people! I am his father! His father should have protected him! I must go find him! I cannot live without knowing! Shoot me if you want, but I'm going! But it doesn't matter! I'm dead already!
Thank you. Lights.
Well, I'm hoping that as you kind of watch that particular scene between these two, you could see just the situation, the situatedness of the one that claims to be the master, even though, of course, he's supposed to be following the other guy who knows where the diamond is, But of course, even in that situation where he's supposed to be the helpless one, he is, of course, still the person who's in charge. He makes it known with his gun, with his knife, with words, on and on. The last thing I do want to say for us to sort of like, I don't know, any comments from you all about what you think about what you saw, even if you didn't watch the rest of the movie and you don't know the rest of the story? Any comments, any impressions? Did you observe something there that you'd like to mention to the whole class? Did you see how interesting it was when, his name is Solomon in the movie. Did you see how interesting it was when Solomon was, the black guy, Solomon was talking with the old man in the village, and just a conversation, this guy is crazy for diamonds just like everybody else. And then the guy says, let's hope they don't find oil, you know, petroleum, in our country because, you know, and it's just, I mean, you're talking about living history. That's, I mean, this is one reason why I love the movie, because it is talking about things we ought to be talking about. It's not silent about the fact that a lot of good resources, you know, embedded in the African soil have become the disaster of Africa, because international mercenaries from all over the world, you know, go to Sierra Leone, and everyone is trying, and they're the ones causing all the wars. The civil war that took place there in the last, that was about 15 years ago it started and lasted for 11 years. All of that happened because of diamonds. People wanted diamonds, and you will be shocked to know I'm writing a paper right now that will be published in a book, somebody else's book, an edited collection called Hollywood's Africa. And I will be writing an article on blood diamonds. But 2 summers ago, I went to Sierra Leone to do, to research the Civil War. I wanted to know more about what happened during the war, because when the war was going on, I was there briefly for the Amistad research, but couldn't go back to even complete that research because of the war. But now that everything was over in 2006, I was able to go back. And while I was there, I was just sort of like talking to people, trying to find out, well, what went on, and realized a whole lot of things went on. I read some FBI papers. I read a lot of papers that had been written on what was going on. And one of the things that I discovered was that if you don't know it, how many of you actually know where Sierra Leone is in Africa? How many of you, the students, really know where Sierra Leone is in Africa? Is it in the west, the east, the north, the south, central? How many people know? Yes, where is it? In the west, absolutely. But do you know there are many people, I mean, when I tell people I'm from Sierra Leone, they ask me if I'm from the Caribbean. I mean, many people I know don't even know whether English is the lingua franca, the main official language. They don't know whether I speak Portuguese or French or what. So I'm kind of used to it now, having lived here for 20 years. I'm used to the whole, you know, knowing that people don't really know. But you will be surprised to know that 2001, September of 2001, when we had the World Trade Center event, you will be surprised to know that a country that most people cannot point to on the map had something to do with it. It had something to do with it. Sierra Leone had something to do with it because the planning by Al-Qaeda to actually raid the World Trade Center, to destroy the World Trade Center, was in the making years before. And one of the things they did was to actually begin to pull their money out of the United States and from the Western countries and buy and translate that money to something that can't be seized. And then they started to buy diamonds, okay? And so there was all this money coming into Sierra Leone, and they had lots more people fighting for, you know, for rights over the mining sites, and all of that, you know, so they were buying the diamonds very fast, paying double the price, and suddenly there was this total chaos. People were fighting, killing each other. Many, of course, didn't know why they were doing it. They didn't know Al-Qaeda had anything to do with this. They just knew some strange people from wherever on the face of the earth were showing up. There were mercenaries from Africa, all over Africa, white and black, Indians, Pakistanis, Russians, name them, Europeans. It seemed like everybody could find a way somehow to that spot in West Africa to get those diamonds. But that particular process, I mean, just because we sometimes think that if we just sort of live in this very isolated place where we just mind our own business and do our own thing, that it has nothing whatsoever to do with something else that's going on with somebody else's life over there. Everything is interconnected. We've talked about how the diamonds that they were, give me that diamond, you know, the diamonds they're fighting for ends up on our fingers right here. You know, will you marry me? You know, kind of event. And we're not even thinking, what does this mean? How many people's hands were cut off for me to have this on my finger? So that's one reason why I really like the fact that this story was told. Although, of course, we still have some of those stereotypes of the master-slave narrative still really there. But I just want us to know that, again, just like you'll be surprised to know the diamond situation, of course, it didn't come up in the movie at all. Who wants to deal with that? Who wants to touch it? You know? But the diamond situation was tied in with the Al-Qaeda event, was tied in with what's going to happen here. I mean, just every part of the world seemed to have been somehow invested and been a part of whatever the guilt process is that we might want to sort of like pull out of the entire 9/11 event. But I just want you to know that the world is not as big and as distant from us as we think. We're all affected. So those things that were happening over there came right here when the towers were toppled. It was all part of one big story. And that's the reason why history is very much alive. History is in the making all the time. And we all have to be sensitive to what's going on around us. We always have to say, how does this fit in with this? And how does this affect that? Okay? So I do want us to really begin to sort of like think when you're doing history, when your wonderful professor is teaching you history, really think about, you know, I mean, now we would look at, say, the Civil War, the American Civil War, or the American, you know, the Revolution, or, you know, we could go back and it just sounds like history. But, you know, when you think about it, you think of real people in real situations that are dying. It, you know, sometimes it just seems so far away. But we have to begin to think about the legacies. How does that affect us? One last thing that I do want to say before I stop. I know I talk a lot. One last thing is that it will be hard for you to really think there is a connection between Blood Diamonds and the movie, the Amistad story that I was talking about. Remember I mentioned the Amistad story about the revolt? It will be very hard. You'll be saying, well, what's the connection? Plenty. Okay? So one of the things that also we should take note of is that it's not that this history happens here in isolation and this one happens here in isolation. The things that are happening in Blood Diamond is coming out of the colonial process. And the colonial process is coming out of the history of slavery. So we find that all of these events right up to today are all interconnected. So I just want you to sort of like really take note of that. I'll stop at this point, and if you have any questions or comments for me, I'll take it. Yes? Well, in Sierra Leone, finally, there was a cessation of the war back in 2001, and some treaties were signed. So by 2003, things were pretty stable. So no, right now, there's peace. Right now, the government has control over those sites, which were really the source of the conflict. Which is not to say that we don't have other problems going on in other places, because it's a much larger story than I can even say here. What was happening in Sierra Leone started in Liberia, and before Liberia, it started with Gaddafi, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, all the way in Libya, because all those leaders of those wars actually went to Libya to train. So it's just a very interconnected world. And so you never really, you know, you begin to say, well, where am I in this picture? Because you are in the picture. So things are happening, things are still happening, but things have calmed down at this point in regards to the diamonds. Yes?
I heard after they signed the treaties that all the RUF members, like, they were going unpunished. Is that true?
They went unpunished? Yeah. For the most part, yeah. When I went to Sierra Leone 2 summers ago, 2006, I stayed in the library and read newspaper article after newspaper article after newspaper article. And people were really upset that the RUF people were not getting the kind of retribution they ought to get. And you'll be surprised to know, I mean, it's just we live in a messy world. I don't know how else to make it look a lot nicer. But Jesse Jackson did not do a good job. He was there to facilitate the signing of the treaty, and he gave too many concessions. And the Sierra Leoneans, based on what I read in the papers, because I didn't know all these things till I read all these things, were very, very upset. They felt Jesse Jackson came there and just messed up everything. You know, so it's just it's a long story. Yeah. Yeah. One more. Yes. Where can you get it, Dr. Mohammed? Oh, okay. You say it.
Tonight we have a reception. It's a public reception with the exhibit that Dr. Osagie is here participating in. And the book will be on sale tonight from 6 to 8:30, fourth floor, our art gallery. But it will also be in the bookstore till October the 5th. So if you get it tonight, you can also have to get a signature.
Yeah, if you show up tonight with the book, I can sign it. Or you can just begin the bookstore and own it. Yeah. Thank you very much. I appreciate this. Thank you.